November 2006, Ken Kutaragi stood on a stage in Tokyo, unveiling a glossy, four-layered monolith that looked less like a console and more like a piece of high-end kitchenware. It was the PlayStation 3, a machine so over-engineered that Sony was losing a staggering $300 on every unit sold, hemorrhaging billions in a desperate bid to own the future of the living room. Powered by the Cell broadband engine, a microprocessor co-developed with IBM and Toshiba, it was marketed not as a toy, but as a supercomputer that would last a decade. It would eventually sell 87 million units and birth the cinematic storytelling of The Last of Us and Uncharted. But beneath the chrome trim and the $599 price tag lay a technical nightmare that nearly bankrupted Sony's gaming division. A hardware architecture so complex it became a digital cage for its own software, and a legacy of arrogance that nearly cost PlayStation its crown. This is the story of the PlayStation 3, the beautiful disaster that in 2026 has become the most important console in the world. To understand why the PS3 matters 2 decades after its birth, you have to understand the hubris of its creation. In 2006, Sony was coming off the back of the PlayStation 2, the best-selling console of all time. They felt invincible. They didn't just want a gaming machine, they wanted a Trojan horse for the Blu-ray format. This led to a design philosophy of more is more. The original fat models were behemoths, packed with a literal PlayStation 2 chipset inside just to ensure backward compatibility. It was a masterpiece of internal engineering and a logistical catastrophe. Sony wasn't just selling a console, they were selling a vision of a unified home theatre hub that could decode complex folding proteins for Stanford University via folding at home while you slept. It was the peak of gadget culture, a heavy, hot, power-hungry beast that demanded reverence.
The heart of the machine, the Cell processor, is the primary reason the PS3 is a focal point of discussion in 2026. While modern consoles like the PS5 and Xbox Series X are essentially specialized PCs using x86 architecture, the PS3 was an alien. Its PowerPC-based core and 7 synergistic processing elements, SPEs, were notoriously difficult to program for. Developers famously compared it to trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while driving a Ferrari. This difficulty created a unique software rot. Because the architecture was so bespoke, hundreds of PS3 exclusives are currently trapped on the hardware. In an era where digital preservation is failing and companies are delisting games at an alarming rate, the PS3 stands as a fortress of physical media. It is one of the last bastions where owning a disc actually means owning the game, free from the tether of a mandatory 100GB day one patch. In the mid-2020s, the remastered era has hit a ceiling. Players are tired of buying the same games every 5 years for $70. This has led to a massive resurgence in the original hardware market. The PS3 is the goldilocks of retro gaming. It's modern enough to look great on an OLED screen through native HDMI, but old enough to represent a time before microtransactions and games as a service became the industry standard. When you boot up Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, you aren't just playing a game, you're experiencing a technical miracle that was never ported to any other system because its code is so deeply entwined with the Cell's unique SPEs. To play these games is to witness a specific moment in time when Sony was willing to burn billions of dollars just to see what was possible. The PS3 also represents the last time Sony took a massive, world-altering risk. After the near-death experience of the PS3's early years, Sony pivoted to the safe architecture of the PS4 and PS5.
While those consoles are successful, they lack the experimental weirdness of the 7th generation. The PS3 gave us Little Big Planet, a game about infinite user-generated creativity, Heavy Rain, a divisive attempt at interactive cinema, and MAG, a shooter that attempted 256-player battles long before the tech was ready. In 2026, as the industry consolidates and AAA budgets balloon to $500 million, developers are rarely allowed to fail. The PS3 was a platform built on the right to fail spectacularly, and that spirit of experimentation is something the modern industry desperately misses. We also cannot ignore the PS3's bizarre afterlife as a literal supercomputer. In 2010, the US Air Force Research Laboratory built the Condor cluster, a supercomputer made of 1,760 PlayStation 3 consoles. It was used for satellite imagery processing because it was the most cost-effective way to achieve massive floating-point performance. While those clusters have long been decommissioned, the legend of the supercomputer console lives on. It reminds us that there was a time when consumer electronics weren't just designed for planned obsolescence, they were designed with a raw power that exceeded their intended purpose. In 2026, when our devices feel increasingly like locked-down services, the raw, untapped potential of the PS3 hardware feels like a relic from a more rebellious age. The 2021 attempt by Sony to shut down the PS3 and Vita digital storefronts was a turning point for the community. The backlash was so intense that Sony was forced to backtrack, keeping the stores open, albeit in a crippled state. This event radicalized a generation of game preservationists. It proved that if we don't hold on to the hardware, the history of the medium will be erased by a corporate spreadsheet. Today, the PS3 modding scene is more active than ever. Enthusiasts have moved past simple piracy. They are building custom firmware that allows the console to run cooler, last longer, and even emulate older systems with higher precision.
The PS3 has become a tinkerer's console, the digital equivalent of a classic muscle car that you keep in the garage and tune on the weekends. As we approach the 20th anniversary of the console's launch, the fat PS3, with its 4 USB ports and CF/SD card readers, has become the holy grail of collectors. It is the only machine in history that can natively play 3 generations of PlayStation history, PS1, PS2, and PS3, all through a single HDMI cable. It is a massive, chrome-accented piece of history that hums with the effort of its own existence. In a world of sleek, silent, white plastic towers, the PS3 feels industrial. It feels significant. It is a reminder of the console wars at their most cutthroat, an era where Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo were trying to reinvent the wheel every 5 years, rather than just iterating on a profitable loop. Ultimately, the PS3 matters in 2026 because it represents the end of the physical era. It was the last console where the disc was the primary delivery mechanism for the majority of its lifespan. As we move toward a future of streaming and cloud-based gaming, where you license your library rather than own it, the PS3 stands as a defiant no. It is a reminder that once, for a brief, expensive, and chaotic moment, we were given a supercomputer in a box, and it belonged to us. It didn't need an internet connection to function. It didn't need a subscription to play a single-player campaign. It just needed a power outlet and an imagination. The story of the PS3 isn't just a story about video games. It's a story about the limits of corporate ambition and the enduring power of the objects we keep. It is a machine that was too expensive to live and too unique to die.
It survived the yellow light of death. It survived the 2011 PSN hack that took the world offline for 23 days. And it survived its own creators' attempts to bury it. As we look at the homogenized landscape of 2026 gaming, we find ourselves looking back at that glossy black monolith with a strange sense of longing. It was arrogant, it was flawed, and it was beautiful. This is the enduring legacy of the PlayStation 3, the console that refused to be forgotten.